That was pretty intense, wasn't it? None of the viewers are going to be seeing that. Before the podcast started, I was like, just firing myself up. Do you know why I was firing myself up, Sam?
Why is that?
Because that's my gender role. I'm a fucking man. I'm a fucking man. Even though I look like a little boy. Yes. Today we're going to be talking about gender roles in a relationship. Now, let me say that one more time. Why you must have gender roles in a relationship. Now, this is going to trigger a lot of people because we live in a day and age where if you're a transvestite, gay, or any of those things, which you're allowed to be, all power to you, you cannot say anything negative about those people. You can't even have an opinion about traditional values. But we live in a day and age where if like you try to talk about being a man or being an alpha or being masculine or a man working hard and a woman looking after the kids, you're the fucking devil. Like, can you realize how crazy that is? And what's funny about that is the people who want equality, which we should have to a degree, you know, people who are transgender, you know, gay, lesbian, which is awesome. I love that. Amazing. Live your truth. It's funny how they want equality, but if we want to talk about our stuff, not they, I'm already going to get in trouble for this podcast. But you know what I'm trying to say, right? It's going to get clipped up. We're living in a masculinity crisis, aren't we? We're living in a masculinity crisis where high performance men who live by traditional values, work hard, make money, provide for my family, provide presence, finances, safety, security. It's almost like they're demonized. And a lot of them end up losing their relationships and their wealth anyway, because they break down. So this massive masculinity crisis. Today we're going to talk about gender roles, but let's start with masculinity, right? What is masculinity, Sam? What like it's almost toxic these days to be masculine, isn't it? I consider masculinity to be amazing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't see it that way. So how would you describe it?
Well, masculinity is like this buzzword, I feel, where a lot of people misinterpret what it is. Masculinity is just to be tough, and it's just to, you know, have the power and you know, lead the way. And it is to a point. However, you know, I think what we see in our world right now is there's a lot of men living in the toxic masculine, which is, you know, that abuse of power, that demanding sort of role where I command you and you submit to me sort of mentality. Off the top of my head right now, I mean, I know of at least five people in my world who have been affected by domestic violence, and that's not just men doing that. But in this particular context, it's men who have not been taught what it means to be a true masculine man and have just gone into this power trip, and it's been at the detriment of others. Masculinity is actually a really amazing thing, to step up and live as men that we were designed, however we believe we were designed to be. Men who lead, men who show up, who carve out the way forward. It's actually a really, can I use the word, beautiful thing to be a masculine man.
Yeah. Masculinity is not toxic. That is complete bullshit. Masculinity at its core is being a protector, a provider, being strong in your body and mind, not mixing up strong with vulnerable. You can be strong and also express emotions. That's masculinity. Masculinity within itself is a degree of strength. The problem with modern day society is masculinity is described as this thing that's evil, but that's because they're referencing the tyrant version of masculinity, which is getting things by force, like forcing people to do your will and being a dictator. And that is an example of masculinity, just like there's an example of femininity, which is just crying all the time and doing nothing. But real masculinity is not being a tyrant. It's being a king. It's being a leader. It's being wise, patient, being able to make difficult decisions, expansion, growth. Real masculinity is what the world needs. It's what the feminine needs. It's what women need. But we're demonizing it instead of fucking calling a spade and going, you know what, this is a beautiful thing. And more men get to step into that. But when the whole media and the world's telling you that's toxic, I mean, that's fucking bullshit. And in reality, it's something we need to change.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you look at the world today, as men, we're more overweight, stressed, depressed, anxious, triggered, divorced than ever before. And it's not because there's anything wrong with us. It's because we keep getting beaten down. We're not building on our masculine. We're not building on who we are as men. So this masculinity thing ties perfectly into this idea of gender roles. We work with so many men. We've currently got 106 clients, business owners, husbands, fathers, managers, high performance men. Maybe you're one of the guys listening who are in a role right now where their role is the provider, right? They protect, provide, they make money, they put food on the table.
Mm.
There's a problem that's beginning to arise where these men do not have a clearly defined role that has been discussed and agreed upon.
Mm.
How many men get married, have kids, and you have all these dreams for the future, and then without discussing it, without actually having a conversation, the unsaid expectation is the man works, the wife stays at home.
Hmm.
It's just the unsaid expectation, right?
Yeah.
Now, in the past, did we need to say the expectation? Not really. Not
Mm.
really. It's just what was. It was, but we live in a day and age where there's so much choice, which is a beautiful thing, but it can cause a lot of chaos inside of the feminine and masculine side of the family dynamic. So
Mm.
why do you think so many men struggle to actually establish a definition of their roles as a husband, as a wife, as a mother, as a father, or if you want to put it simply, as a male and a female in a relationship? What causes so many of us to struggle to define those roles, agree upon them, and then track and measure them?
The easiest way to, I guess unconsciously define the role of male and female in a relationship, the easiest way is for us to just replicate what we've been brought up in, replicate the
Yes.
family dynamic that we've been brought up in. I was brought up in a family dynamic where dad went to work and provided, mum stayed home, tended to the kids. When we went to school, she went back to work. That
Mm,
was the norm. And there's I think this, it's almost 1950s sort of, that's the role, that's the norm. And then you get, together with someone, you get into a relationship who may have been brought up in a different way.
mm,
And there's this underlying tension because it's not really normally something we talk about before we get into a relationship or talk about before we get married. We just live out what we know because it feels normal. I chatted with a I chatted with a man who was going to come and work with us a few months ago. And he said, I'm at a point where I'm taking off in my career, but now my wife's going, the kids are at school. I want to take off in my career. And now she's more successful than I am.
yep.
And now I don't know what my role is or my place is in our relationship context.
Mm, absolutely.
And I
Was
feel
that your
less than.
notification? Was that your notification that went off?
May have been.
It was really loud. It popped my ears. Sorry, I cut you off on that last sentence. What was that? And we'll get that notification off before we continue. We don't want to blow up anyone's eardrums. Yeah.
I don't remember
So
what I
yeah,
said.
yeah. So you're talking about that guy, and like he's like, my wife makes more than me now, and there's this like undefined role, and then the masculinity crisis begins to occur. Now, I want to make it very clear: if you want to be a woman that works hard and makes money, all power to you.
Yeah.
And if you want to be a man who doesn't provide for the family, but instead is present at home with the kids, all power to you.
Mm.
But if you're in a relationship where you haven't defined each other's roles, not just the gender role, but the role in terms of children, the role in terms of finances, if you've not come together and decided on the definition of each role, then
Mm.
you're really just guessing. And if you're guessing in a relationship, that means you're trying to read someone's mind. And
Yeah.
unless you're fucking Professor Xavier from the X-Men, that's impossible. Yet
Mm.
so many of our relationships are built upon unsaid expectations and mind reading. So in a relationship, you must have clearly defined roles, not just gender roles, but a definition of what each of you do in that relationship. And then
Mm.
taking it a step further, you get to track and measure these things.
Yeah.
Like when Rosie and I first, let me mark this. The reason relationships really break down is because gender roles aren't defined. So when my wife and I had our first daughter, we sat down when she was about to finish her job. She was making 2.5 grand a week, great job. I was making good money. We were crushing it. We're about to lose her income. She's about to be a stay-at-home mom. And we had a sit-down conversation. And it went to something like this. Cool. So I'm going to work. I'm going to make money. I'm going to provide. I'm going to make sure you don't have to work. I'm going to pay you a wage. What I'd love for you to support with is make sure the baby doesn't die. I'm just kidding. Like feed her, look after her, nurture her. Can you support me with prepping meals. Can you support me with all these things? And we agreed on the definition. I work, she nurtures. However, what happened 3 months in? She's overwhelmed. She's stressed. She feels like she has no purpose. She's lost her freedom. So even though we've agreed upon it, we haven't been tracking and measuring it. And this resentment begins to build in the relationship. Because I'm like, I'm working hard and making money. Why are you stressed and upset at me? Your
Mm,
job's easy. It's just a story. I've said this before. It's obviously not easy, but we've defined these roles. The thing is, those definitions can change. They really can. And that's why you got to track and measure what the definitions of each of your roles are in the gender and also in the relationship. And no
mm,
one really does this.
mm.
No one really does this. It's difficult to have these conversations.
Yeah.
Before we move on to the next point, anything you want to add to that, Sam?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that's great. One of the
Yeah.
things from a female's perspective, which actually came out of a conversation I had with a female around
Yeah.
this, trying to get into their mentality of it all.
Hmm.
As men, we work hard, but we finish. For sometimes we don't feel like we do, but from a woman's perspective who's home nurturing, cooking, cleaning, they don't feel that they finish. And again, it's all stories, but they don't
Yeah.
feel that they finish. And so I remember with my ex, there was this underlying resentment. It's like, you finish work now, you should be
Yeah.
helping me do this. And it's like, and it's a
I worked, I'm exhausted from today. How can I
yeah,
help you with anything?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
cause of tension and friction in the relationship. And
Yeah.
when those boundaries and those roles aren't defined, then it's cause for chaos in the future. I stayed with you and Rosie back in September, October, and I
Hmm.
loved it when, you finished work for the day and you came downstairs and you said to Rosie, all right, I'm going to go up and bathe Talia, or I'm going to go and do this. And it was that you could tell that there was a level of understanding and agreement that you guys had come to
Hmm.
for you to jump in and release her from some of that and vice versa.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really great.
Yeah, it was really great. And the thing is, we didn't initially have that though. So the initial expectation of the gender role was she looks after the baby and I work. But
Mm,
very quickly, as a business owner, husband, and father, you realize that's not how it works. It just simply isn't. It may exist somewhere, but I don't see it often. And it has to be a give and take without the expectation of give and take. So when I give, I can't expect anything in return. So we realized very quickly in our relationship that, like, yes, she's gets to cook, clean, look after the house, and to me those things are relatively simple, but to her they're not. So when I come downstairs and I've had 9 meetings, like yesterday or the day before, I had 9 calls, and I come downstairs and the kitchen needs washing, or the dishes need washing, or the baby needs bathing. We've had this conversation in our love meetings, which we talked about in the previous podcast. Every relationship needs that. And she said, I need more support. I'm like, cool, this is what I'm committing to. So now my role isn't just to protect and provide. My role is to support at the end of the day. But we've defined that role. And even though I'm a man and that's more a feminine type of archetype, and we'll get into masculine, feminine next, it's more feminine to nurture. That's a natural thing. It's a natural thing. Men are designed, look at our bodies, to do hard things and to hunt and to fuck and to kill. That's what we're designed to do, right? You can't fight biology, but we get to be in that more feminine role because we've had a discussion about that.
mm,
So that takes us into the second reason why you must have gender roles in a relationship. Hey, legend, if you're getting value from this podcast, then you're going to love our Empowered Man 7-Day Challenge. Inside, we've taken some of the best content our clients invest thousands of dollars for to change their lives, and we've given it to you in the course of 7 days. This challenge is worth over $3,000, and you can get it for $37, 97% off. Inside, we'll teach you how to fix your marriage and relationships and reconnect with your partner, your kids, your wife. We will teach you how to take back your time, how to take back your power, get into powerful routines, and how to take control of your life, take control of your mind, take control of your business, take control of your health, take control of your wealth. Sounds too good to be true, but there's a complete money back guarantee. So if you're enjoying this podcast, go to elitebusinessman.com/challenge. That's elitebusinessman.com/challenge. It's going to be in the call notes as well, and you'll be able to register for this challenge that will completely change your life. There is chaos that begins to happen in relationships when you don't have a clearly defined gender role, because genders are simply expressions of masculine and feminine energy. Typically, men are more masculine And typically, women are more feminine. Now, can you be a man who's feminine? Of course you can. Can you be a man who wants to be with other men? Of course you can. Can you be a masculine man that wants to be with other men? Of course you can. You can be a woman who's very masculine and a man who's very feminine. But typically, as the course of nature shows us, most men are more masculine and most women are more feminine. It's in our nature. It's how we're designed. We're designed, men, to do masculine things, build things, break things, hunt, protect, kill. Women are designed to, nurture, provide. They're literally designed to bear children. You cannot argue that, although a lot of feminists and, politically correct people will. Oh, you can't say that. Well, I fucking can. You can't argue biology. Does that mean every woman needs to have a child? No. Does that mean every man needs to work and provide and hunt and go to war? No. We don't live in that day and age anymore. But it's really important to understand that masculine and feminine are two different types of energy. Now, if you haven't defined in your relationship the specific roles of each gender, and you're not tracking and measuring, what's going to happen is the masculine and feminine are going to polarize with each other. So if you're a masculine man, you've worked all day, you come home and your house is a mess, and your wife is masculine back at you saying, you need help, and she's attacking you, masculine trait, then you're going to butt heads, right? And it's really important that we don't have this toxic mix of masculine and feminine. There is no toxic masculine. There's a toxic mix and polarization of these two energies, and that creates chaos in a relationship. Have you observed this in your relationship or others? Like, how does this typically show up where the woman becomes more masculine and the man becomes more feminine? I mean, I dealt with it last night. I'll share a story. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, many, many, many times. Like, as you just used that example, you get home, you're tired. Why is this not done? Or why is that? We can step into that. Or tonight we're going to do this, and you're showing up to lead, and then it's like, no, because you didn't do this and you haven't done this, and both trying to lead at the same time. Where it's, I like to think of the masculine and feminine like a dance. Like there's this rhythm, there's this flow. And when you're both in the masculine at the same time, as you said, it's polarization, like it's friction. It's you're kind of trying to come together, but you're just going opposite ways. And the miscommunication comes in, the reactions come in, and we move to more, I like to think of masculine and feminine have a healthy and a toxic side of the scale.
Yes.
And what's a healthy masculine, healthy feminine becomes toxic. It becomes manipulation. It becomes a power trip. And we're talking at each other as opposed to each other.
Yeah. I mean, if you come home from a long day at work, you're a successful guy making money and providing, you got that masculine energy of like going to war, dealing with people, putting out fires, and you're go, high stress, and you bring that same energy home to your wife and kids, that is a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So even though you've got the gender role defined of you work, she looks after the family, you've got to be able to now tap down or turn down that masculinity and then step into a better femininity. Like come home as a man and be able to tap into that part of yourself and go, how was your day, babe? Can I help you with anything? Hold the kids and hug them. That's not a very masculine thing to do. But this is the point, is we've got to be able to step into these areas. And it's very difficult to do that if you're not aware of whether you're being over masculine or over feminine. And like you said, you can be toxic or you can be empowered in each of these areas. And this happens a lot with women these days, especially in relationships. They try to put on the pants. Not all of them. There's exceptions to every rule. But I've noticed with a lot of guys we work with, the woman puts on the pants and she's in charge. And I'm going to say something that's going to trigger a lot of people here. It is a man's job to lead. Does that mean women can't be leaders? No. But if the woman is leading every single situation, then she has no one to lead her. That's very, very uncommon. It's very, very, it's happening a lot actually. And even my sister-in-law, like she's a very, very strong-willed, successful woman. She's very in her masculine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. What I'm saying though is she needs a masculine man. Otherwise, she's not going to have a great relationship because that man won't be able to keep up with her candor and her pace. You know what I mean? So as men, we've got to be able to be that leader. And the problem arises when the woman now is trying to match that energy. Like that can cause a massive disaster. It can cause a lot of arguments and a lot of problems. Another problem we deal with is modern day women have been told that it's bad to just be a stay-at-home mother. Like we got the internet now. This happens with Rosie. She sees all these influencers who make $4 million a year and live on a hill here and they just sell a course about manifestation, not knocking it, but it's like, yeah, you can have freedom, babe, and like live a life of purpose. And we create this like vision of what a woman should have. Whereas I remember 20 years ago, to be a mother was the greatest thing ever.
Mm.
I get to stay at home. I don't have to work. I can go have coffee with my other mother friends. I can walk around the beach. Like, it was this dream life. Whereas now social media and the world has said, that's bad. That's evil. I remember watching a documentary, a mini one, on this woman who she was just a picture perfect traditional wife. And this is traditional values we're talking about here. Christian values, actually. It's very, very religious, this value. And she was really happy just being a stay-at-home mom, cooking for her family, ironing. Who irons these days? Ironing, doing the dishes, like what I saw my grandmother doing. And all these people on these Facebook groups were like giving her shit. All these other women were like, girl, you got to stand up for yourself. Like, you shouldn't be confined to this prison. And this woman gets interviewed and says, I enjoy it. I
Mm.
love being a mother. And that's almost demonized these days. That role of a nurturing wife is demonized.
Mm.
But it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't. So the reason I brought this up, this chaotic mix of masculine and feminine energy, is because it creates a toxic polarization.
Mm.
And I'm sure every man listening has experienced this in their relationship. But that leads to the next reason why you must have gender roles in a relationship. And that is, it creates an uncertain family dynamic. It teaches children negative patterns. Have you experienced this in your own life? I mean, we talked about it prior to the show starting. It seems like most of our problems, the reason we need coaches is because of this.
Yeah, yeah. The biggest thing that comes up to me when I think of an uncertain family dynamic is actually two things I'll share.
Mm-hmm.
It's our map and our model of the world, based
Mm-hmm.
and determined upon how we were brought up, what we saw, whether we had a masculine leader as a father that was present, or
Mm-hmm.
a mother who felt like she had to step into both roles at the same time, and all the power to the single mums who
Mm-hmm.
do that. But it causes this uncertain family dynamic. We get into relationships and we don't know who we are. We don't know how we're meant to lead. We're just doing the best with what we can, because there's no guidebook.
Yep.
No guidebook
Yep.
on how to do it. So
Yep.
there's that element of it. But also this uncertain family dynamic is created when the man goes in to lead in a maybe an unhelpful environment, like an unhelpful space. It's more toxic, power
Yep.
trip. The
Yep.
woman isn't necessarily is feeling a bit more empowered, seeing social media and going, nah, I'm, independent and whatever. And there's the friction. It
Mm-hmm.
almost pushes the man down
Yep.
to the point where the woman takes over, takes the lead because she feels like she has to. And then it causes this uncertain family dynamic, because then she's resentful that the man's not leading, but he's not feeling empowered to lead.
Yes. He feels beaten down.
Beaten
Yeah.
down, and the roles
Yep.
change.
Yep.
It creates so much uncertainty in the family dynamic, to the
Yep.
point where our kids are so confused
Yep.
with what they're learning and how they're meant to step up as they grow.
Yep. Yep. Children are so confused these days by what's going on at high school, at primary school, intermediate school. At 10 years old, they're told they can choose their gender. They're told they can choose what sex they want to be. They're told they can choose to do whatever they want. And all power to you when you're an adult, but you can't buy alcohol when you're a child. You can't buy prescription medication when you're a child. You can't have sex when you're a child. And good, none of those things should happen, because as a child, you have no idea what you're doing. Then you combine like the mother and father not having gender roles, and the woman's overly masculine and overriding the male, and the male doesn't know how to hold his own and be a leader, because all women really want to be led. We can argue that all you want, but it's the truth. We all want to be led. Then it's going to cause a lot of chaos in that child's mind. And there's this uncertainty in the family dynamic where a child doesn't know what a man and a woman are. Like,
Mm.
this is the problem in 2022, 2023, is like, if you don't know what a man and a woman are, then you're fucked. There's a really good documentary on I think it's on YouTube, called "What is a Woman?" or "What is a Man?" No, "What is a Woman?" I think it's called "What is a Woman?" And he goes to the tribes in Africa, Matt Walsh, and he asked them. He's like, "What if a man decided to be a woman, like what would you call that? And they're like, that's crazy. How can a man decide to be a woman? And these African tribes are like, well, like if he chooses to be a woman, they're like, that doesn't make any sense. And there was this uproar about it. There's this uproar. It's like, and then he goes around interviewing people, and he's like, can you define what a woman is? And they're like, no one can answer it.
Mm.
And he's like, biologically, a man he's got a penis. He's born a man. That's biologically what it is. So if you change the definition to you feel like a woman, that's who you are, then it really causes a lot of obscurity. And this is what children are dealing with in this day and age. And that's not at home. That's in social media, schools, Little Nas X twerking on the devil. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Little Nas X, this gay homosexual rapper or singer who, all power to him. Again, nothing against being homosexual. Go for it, dude. Like, do whatever you want. But this guy's twerking on the devil in a music video, kissing men in the video, and that's allowed on social media, but other things get taken down. Or this podcast is now evil because we're talking about gender roles.
Mm.
What the fuck, right? So there has to be some degree in a relationship of you teaching your children what is the role of a man and what is the role of a woman. Again, you can be a woman that works hard and a man who nurtures, but you got to show your children what these true definitions are. And this is why I truly believe that traditional values, the man works hard, the woman's at home, is a great starting point. Can the woman still have a business? Yes. Can the man still nurture? Yes. But those traditional values worked so well in the past without that toxic piece, abuse, controlling, all that sort of stuff. Because this is the problem. If your children are in a relationship where they see toxic masculinity, or the woman being over masculine, or there's no roles in the relationship and the woman's walking over the man, or the man doesn't know how to communicate or show emotion, then it's going to take them years to unravel that shit. It's going to take them years of therapy, counseling, coaches, programs like ours to unravel it. Ironically, our program takes like 2 or 3 weeks, whereas most counselors or therapists, they don't fix anything, just what I've observed from the facts. The next reason, we're almost done, of why you must have gender roles in a relationship is biology, right? We live in a day and age where we have so much choice. You can literally choose to be a woman or a man depending on how you feel on the day. You can choose to be a tree. You can identify as whatever you want to identify as. It's the fucking crazy world we live in. But you cannot argue biology. And do you know what's funny? People will. Like, if you're born with a penis, you're a man. And you can choose to be a woman, but it doesn't change the fact that you're a man. You can identify as what you want. And then people will be like, well, no, that's not fair. You can't tell me what I am. It's like, well, no, I can. That tree is not an elephant. Like, just because I think it's an elephant doesn't mean it's an elephant. Our biology, in our nature, naturally, as women and men, we have a certain nature. So what is the nature of a man? I mean, you're a religious guy. You used to be a pastor. So you understand this a lot deeper than some people. What is the biology or the nature of a man versus the biology and a nature of a woman?
We're born, I'll mark this, we're born with our, not just our parts, but our makeup. We're made, in the image of what we're created from, depending upon what people believe. And I'm not pushing anything on anyone, but we then we're designed. And my personal belief, like I will sit with anybody and embrace them and love them. It doesn't matter what they believe or who they identify as. You're welcome at my table. My belief, though, is that when we're born a certain way, it's our privilege to embrace that and to make that work for ourselves. Now, we may tend to be more masculine, more feminine. I tap into my feminine a lot more. I'm a nurturer. I sit with people. I listen. But that's also skilled me to be a great coach, but also skilled me in the past to be a great pastor as well, to be able to sit with people. And there's some of those things that, have been tended to over the years. I agree. You can't argue with biology. We're born with in a certain image. We're born in a certain likeness. And it's our privilege to see that unfold and develop over time. And when we choose to change that, we're choosing to change how we were born and created to be.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me personally, it almost, again, this might get, we might
Oh,
get,
all of this is controversial because if
yeah.
you have an opinion, you're now a bigot
Mm,
and a transphobe and a thisphobe. We're not. We can say that 20,
yeah.
1700 times. But
Yeah.
what matters is the intent. And the people who actually have half a brain will understand what we're trying to say. And if
Mm,
you're one of the people listening getting triggered, I highly recommend you find a podcast that's going to stroke your ego and tickle your balls. Because like these are facts,
mm,
right? Now, something you said though that's quite relevant is like you're choosing. Okay, I personally believe, and I could be wrong about this. I'm not an expert, but I feel like most experts aren't experts. I don't know if like you can choose some things. Like you can be born a man, but something within you drives you to want to be a woman. That's not a problem. The problem is when you don't clearly define these things,
yeah.
right? And a lot of children are forced into this sort of stuff, and they don't get a choice, right? But it is important to understand the difference between the two. Women and men are not equal. Let me say that one more time because people are going to get fucking triggered. Women and men are not equal. We're equal in terms of our rights. We get to vote. We're equal in terms of our value to the world. We're equal in terms of, what we're allowed to do and where we're allowed to travel. We should have equality in that area. But to say we're equal biologically is a fucking fallacy. We live in this crazy made up world. Men, biologically, most of the time, are stronger, taller, faster, right? That is a biological trait of most men. Whereas women typically are more agreeable in terms of their character traits. They're smaller, they're lighter. They're also more nurturing by definition, whereas men are more like go, 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 and they're order, and then the women are the chaos, right? These are typical generalizations, but biologically and physically, we are not the same. And to say that we are is fucking ridiculous. Now, that's not a bad thing. We can be different in terms of our biology while coming together and working together. But for that to work, we have to have clearly defined roles as woman and man. But if you can't define what a woman and man is, then how the fuck can you do that? Right?
Mm,
So to go against our nature is very, very difficult. You see this with a lot of women that work really, really hard. It's in our nature to bear children. I'm not saying every woman should have a child. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying biologically, their hips are literally built to bear children. Most women, right? So a woman goes and works, works, works. And how many women have you heard of? They get to like 40 and they're like, fuck, I want to have a kid now. But it's too late because they haven't defined that role. They haven't thought that far
mm,
ahead. How many men do you know that work themselves to the bone to provide for their family, but they have a mental breakdown, heart attack, they get cancer, or their wife leaves? It's because we haven't defined these roles and shared that responsibility around. I think the real takeaway from this podcast is everyone has a role in life, right? Everyone has a role in life. This podcast, the role of this podcast for you is to educate you. Your parents, their role was to nurture you. Your children, your role is to nurture them. Everyone has a role in life, and we live in a day and age where we get to choose our roles, and that's almost a problem in some ways. It was so much simpler
mm,
when you just worked hard and made money for the family and the wife looked after the kids. I'm not saying that was the right way. What I'm saying is it was simpler. Doesn't mean it was right. But we can look to that for motivation for how we can build moving forward.
mm.
So in my relationship, I work hard, make money, and provide. I run this podcast. We coach over 100 clients. If you want to be one, go to the comment links down below. And then Rosie looks after the house, but Rosie wants to start a business. So that money I'm providing now allows her to start a business. She's supported me through cooking, cleaning, looking after the house, so I don't go home to a mess. I have order, and then I support her with the finances. And maybe in the future, she'll have a successful business and I won't work. But we've defined these roles. And it's the lack of definition and tracking and measuring of these roles that causes divorces, causes businesses to break down, and causes resentment in relationships because we don't define and agree upon them. So, for anyone listening right now, how do they change this? Because most people never define these roles. And when they do it, there's a lot of resistance because of that masculine, feminine energy. How would someone listening to this going, fuck, that's me. My relationship has no roles defined. We're constantly at each other. It's affecting my business, my health, my happiness. How would one change that?
Not having those roles defined is a lack of clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we get to do is to create clarity. We get to start to communicate and talk. And I love that this podcast is coming off the back of our love meetings because it's part of it. Are you feeling supported? Are you feeling empowered? Like, how can it opens and creates space for us to create clarity, to have a conversation, to say, well, just because you're the woman and I'm the man, like how are we going to define our roles? How are we going to make it work for us and for our relationship and for our family dynamic?
Mhm.
Simple conversation and communication, I think, is really the first step.
Yeah.
To
It's
define.
having that difficult conversation. It's like, I listen to this podcast, I've just realized that we just exist. We go to work, we look after the kids, we take them to practice. You know, I got the business, you got the other stuff, and like we haven't come together and talked about this. And it's funny how we can even have children without having these discussions, and how we can even go into business without having these discussions. And we live in a day and age where you can choose who you want to be, but also a day and age where you have podcasts like this. To get this sort of information 20 years ago, you needed those thick encyclopedias. So it's really important to understand that if you don't have the gender roles defined in your relationship, if you are a masculine man who wants to be more in tune with your feminine and connect with your wife, and you want to have more connection with your kids, and if you're a feminine woman who's potentially listening to this and you want to, you know, take the pants off and not have to wear the pants in the house, and you want your man to lead, like, you got to have these conversations, because it truly is a big problem in this day and age. You know, the amount of men who come to our program who need to ask for permission from their wife to do the program, and their wife's about to leave. We've had guys who are like, I need to ask my wife. She comes and she's like, you can't do this, blah, blah, don't spend money. It's like, and then they get separated. It's crazy, the masculine energy, right? So, my friends, if you've listened to this far, first thing to understand is we have a masculinity crisis going on out there. You're either toxic for being masculine, you're a tyrant, you're angry, you're triggered, you're stressed, very common. If you're one of those guys, I used to be, or you're beaten down for being a leader. A true masculine man is in control. He's wise, he's patient, he's a king, he makes difficult decisions, he leads his family. Second, in a relationship, you get to have clearly defined and agreed upon roles. It's the same in your business. Same with your children. You get to have clearly defined and agreed upon roles. Have the conversation, track and measure these things. This avoids unset expectations. Third, there is often a chaotic mix of masculine and feminine energy. This creates polarization. Hyper-masculine is go, go, go. Hyper-feminine is too nurturing, too like, you know, emotional. We want to have a mix of both. This leads to an uncertain family dynamic, teaches children negative patterns, which is against our biology and nature. We get to tap into our nature within us. Women are built for this, men are built for this. We get to accept that and work around it. We don't have to live that way, but we get to acknowledge it. And remember, everyone has a role in life. We live in a day and age where we can choose our roles. So talk about it. If you feel like the role in your relationship is not working right now, it's time to have a serious conversation. Because Sam, as you know, what's the consequence of not having this conversation?
Breakdown, divorce, disconnection with ourselves as well as those around us.
Yep. Incongruence with who we feel like we should be and we get to be. Yeah, for sure. So if you are a man listening to this and you would like to help getting your gender roles sorted out, there'll be 2 links down below. The first one is to jump into our 7-day Empowered Man Challenge, where we teach you a whole bunch of stuff on relationships, health, wealth, to get that role and that masculinity. And there'll be a second link below that one where you can book a call with our team directly and apply to work with us as a coaching client. I hope you guys got some value from this. We have an awesome podcast episode scheduled for next week, so make sure you show up to that. It's going to be all about what women don't understand about men. Yes, it's going to be a good one. So I hope you got some value from this. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up on YouTube, drop a comment down below, or if you're listening on podcast platforms, give it 5 stars and let us know what you want support with. Have an amazing day, guys, and we'll talk to you later. Hey, brother, I hope you got a ton of value from that podcast. If you would like to work with us personally and get some of the best content we've launched for our clients who invested thousands of dollars, then go and complete our 7-day Empowered Man Challenge. This mission will completely transform your life. If it doesn't, you won't have to pay a cent. It's only $37, and it is game-changing if you want to take back control. So if you want to find balance between business, family, and life, if you want the relationship, the health, the wealth that you deserve, then go to elitebusinessman.com/challenge. That's elitebusinessman.com/challenge and take up this challenge to take back control of your life.